Okay, so when you think of the Wild West, what's the first name that pops into your head? For a lot of people, it's going to be Billy the Kid, right? He's pretty much the most famous gunslinger of all time, a legend carved into American history. But the real man, well, he's way more complicated, and honestly, way more interesting than the myth.
And here's something that might surprise you, something that kind of hints at that deeper story. His last words, they weren't some defiant shout in English. They were a confused question in Spanish. That one little detail tells you there's a whole other side to this person that the simple legend of a cold-blooded killer just completely missing.
So, to really understand the guy, we have to start with the most basic thing of all, and that's the mystery of his name. I mean, who was he really? Yeah, see, that's the first thing you need to get. We're not even 100% sure about his name. Most historians have landed on William Henry McCarthy Jr., born around November 23, 1859. But, throughout his very short life, he was also known as Kid Antrim and, of course, the one that stuck, William H. Bonney. Changing names all the time was just part of life when you were on the run. The myth kind of paints him as this natural-born killer, right? But his childhood tells a totally different story. So let's take a look at the boy before he became the outlaw. By all accounts, the young Billy was actually a great kid. Polite, helpful, always cheerful. He was really into music and was just totally immersed in the local Hispanic culture. He even spoke Spanish fluently, had a ton of Mexican friends. He was a normal kid. So what on earth changed? Well, basically everything. In 1874, his mom died, and his stepfather, he just walked out, leaving him and his brother completely on their own. So at just 15 years old, he's an orphan, he's all alone, and he gets arrested for stealing food. Then comes a second arrest, but this time, he's not sticking around. He climbs up and out through a chimney, and just like that, he's a federal fugitive. I mean, his whole world fell apart in the span of about a year.
So after a few years of drifting, Billy ends up in Lincoln County, New Mexico, and he walks straight into a situation that was about to just explode. And it's here that he finds a new sense of loyalty and a fight that would pretty much define his life. So here's the setup. Lincoln County was basically controlled by one corrupt group, the Dolan Murphy faction. They had the economy, the politics, even the sheriff all in their pocket. Then, this young English rancher named John Tunstall shows up and decides to challenge them. And Tunstall, he sees something in Billy. He gives him a job, not as a hired gun, but as a ranch hand. And for the first time since his mother died, Billy had a mentor. He had a place he belonged. And this is what kicks the whole thing off. On February 18th, 1878, men working for the corrupt Sheriff Brady ambushed and murdered John Tunstall. And this wasn't a gunfight, it was a straight-up execution. Billy was devastated, so he and the other ranch hands formed this posse called the Regulators. Now technically they were deputized, they had some legal authority to go after the killers, but justice quickly turned into revenge and they ended up ambushing and killing Sheriff Brady himself. The war was officially on. After the war, Billy was a wanted man, but he saw a way out, a deal with the new governor that he hoped would clear his name for good. The governor was a guy named Lew Wallace, and little fun fact, this is the same guy who later wrote the novel Ben-Hur. He actually met secretly with Billy, and he promised him a full pardon for everything he did in the war if Billy would testify about another murder he saw. Billy agreed. He held up his end of the deal. But the system was still just as corrupt as ever. After Billy testified, the local prosecutor, who was probably in the pocket of the old monopoly, just refused to let him go. Weeks go by, then months, and Billy finally realizes the pardon's a lie, he'd been played. So he did what he was getting pretty good at. He escaped. Now, just let this sink in for a second. After all the killing, all the ambushes, all the corruption of the Lincoln County War, do you know how many people were ever actually convicted for any of it? One. Just one person. And it was Billy the Kid for killing Sheriff Brady. He was eventually captured by Sheriff Pat Garrett's posse and sentenced to hang.
So there he is, sentenced to die, locked up in the Lincoln courthouse, just weeks away from the gallows. What happened next would become maybe the most famous jailbreak in the history of the American West.
Okay, so picture this. One guard takes the other prisoners to go eat, leaving Billy with just one guard, James Bell. Billy asks to go to the outhouse. On the way back up the stairs, he somehow gets loose, kills Bell, and then breaks into Pat Garrett's own office and grabs a shotgun. When the other guard, Bob Ollinger, hears the noise and comes running back, Billy shoots him from a second-story window. Then he just calmly breaks his shackles, steals a horse, and rides right out of town. The sheer audacity of it is just incredible.
But now he was being hunted by his old acquaintance, Pat Garrett, a man who knew him, knew his habits. Garrett got a tip that Billy might be near Fort Sumner, visiting some friends. So on the night of July 14, 1881, Garrett sneaks into the home of a mutual friend, a guy named Pete Maxwell, and just waits in the pitch-black bedroom.
So Billy, who was staying nearby, gets a craving for some beef. He walks over to Maxwell's house to cut a piece off a side of beef hanging on the porch. He sees two of Garrett's deputies outside, gets suspicious, and backs into that dark bedroom, pulling his pistol and asking his friend in Spanish, "¿Quién es? Who is it? Who is it?" Before he could get an answer, Garrett, hiding in the shadows, recognizes his voice. He fires 2 shots. The first one hits Billy right in the chest, killing him instantly. And just like that, it was over. The most famous outlaw in the West was dead at just 21 years old. So why? Why, more than 140 years later, are we still so fascinated by this guy? Well, you see, his death wasn't really the end of his story. In a lot of ways, it was the beginning of his legend. The legend, and it's a story Billy himself apparently liked to tell, is that he killed 21 men, 1 for each year of his life. It's such a chilling, memorable line. It's what really sealed his image as this ruthless, cold-blooded killer.
But the reality? Well, it's a lot less sensational. Historians have gone through the records with a fine-tooth comb, and the real number is probably closer to 9. And a lot of those happened during the Lincoln County War, where he was fighting as part of a posse that was, at least at first, legally deputized.
And look at this comparison. It really shows you how overblown his reputation became. When you look at guys like John Wesley Hardin, who's credited with over 50 kills, Billy wasn't even close to being the most lethal outlaw of his time. So why is he the one we all remember? I think it comes down to the unanswered questions. For years, people have wondered if Garrett, who knew Billy, might have faked his death to let his friend escape. You had guys like Brushy Bill Roberts, who came forward decades later claiming to be the real, elderly Billy the Kid. And that whole debate about the broken promise from the governor, it's still going on. As recently as 2010, the governor of New Mexico actually considered and then denied giving him a posthumous pardon.
So what's the takeaway here? The story of Billy the Kid isn't some simple tale of good versus evil. Was he a hardened killer? Was he a misunderstood kid trying to get justice in a totally corrupt world? Or was he just a tragic figure created by violence and betrayal? The truth, as it usually is probably somewhere in the middle. And that's exactly why his legend will probably never die.